Hello everybody, I hope you're well. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you will have noticed that I speak a lot about law. And today I wanted to expand that theme by talking about the law of the heart. Because where we are moving into a time of reconciled polarity. We are moving into a time where the carnal mind starts to take more of a backseat and we activate our heart. You could say that the recent history of our time, at least, has been severely dominated by our carnal instincts, our need for survival and safety. And a lot of that is tied up in the fact that there's a lot of trauma and wounding in the collective psyche of humanity. We hold a lot of that in our lower centers, which are there to help us experience tribalism, relationship, and self empowerment. So that's your root chakra, your sacral, and your solar plexus. But as a collective now, the need for us to evolve energetically is about how we open the heart, because the heart is the throne room of God. It's where the voice of the conscience speaks from. It's where deeper wisdom comes from. It's where our eternal knowing rests. It's where we don't need to rely so much on knowledge because we understand that everything we need is given to us in the moment through the voice of our conscience, through the voice of the divine. So how do we access that, and how do we start to open that up more so that we can live in this realm of love and law as one system? Love is not separate to law, it's its own law, and unconditional love doesn't require our participation. It's just there, it's just unconditional. And you could say that in its most macro expression, it's very impersonal. It isn't about romance, it isn't about fluff and all the sentiments that come with some of the love and light sentiments that you get in the spiritual community. When people talk about love, especially in a world where things are seemingly so out of that, it's hard to listen to because the mind wants to say nonsense. Look at the state of the world. It's too crazy. How can we be focusing on these come by our sentiments when the world is in such a state? And I completely understand that. I completely understand that. But what I do and what I'm trying to do with this channel here is open a dialogue and a perspective which is aligned with where we are going. Because where we are going is about reconciling the polarities, reconciling the conflicts, reconciling the my truth versus your truth, and all the different divisions that we experience on this planet. We are going there whether we like it or not. And although many people would look at the world today and say it's on a crash course to destruction, complete destruction, that's impossible because the law also dictates that everything returns and that humanity has lived and this world has lived in states of harmony before, and the one sound that we all live in will reharmonize again. And the choice for the individual now is, do I want to come kicking and screaming into that new world, or do I want to move with the tides of change that are coming so that I can find more balance and more coherence in my life? Because there are people on the planet living there now. It's not that they have moved into some new dimension or they have gone to heaven. It's that they have finally realized that all those things are available to them in the here and now. And that their job is not about putting themselves in some hierarchical position of better than the others. It's not about separating 3D or 5D. It's not about separating awake versus asleep versus awake. It's about how those of us who have experienced that and understand the kingdom that's coming can extend our hands out to those who are still opening up to that. Because awakening and moving into a higher dimension is not about going somewhere else. It's not about being in a better place. It's about opening to a wider perspective of what is already true. As I said, unconditional love is already here. It doesn't need our participation. But the more we come into alignment with it, the more we are going to start seeing it expressed in the collective. So the heart is the channel through which we do that. And again, I don't want to talk about the heart in some passive, fluffy, soft sentiment. I think I've mentioned before on this channel that actually opening your heart takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of grit, it takes a lot of determination and discipline. It's not easy because we have to be able to look at the horrors that are unfolding on this planet and reconcile that. Reconcile it by understanding God, not God as the punisher, but God as the ultimate provider, God as the ultimate authority, the ultimate sovereign, which if we were aligned to, if we were really listening to, we would start to find more balance in our own life. They say that if you want to change the world, you've got to change yourself first. And that's not because if you just change today, the immediate effect of that will be global harmony and peace. But what it will do is it will give you a higher vantage point. And I say higher just for the purposes of this discussion, not to suggest that it's better, but just to help us understand how when we take a larger perspective, let's say if we take the eagle's view or the view from the top of the apartment building to look down on creation in its entirety, we can understand more impersonally and through the lens of law and love how these things that we are battling against come to be. And then we also have the solution. So my work is really about giving people that perspective to look beyond some of the chaos and some of the calamity and see the deeper law beneath it, and also understand the trajectory forward, because where we are headed there will be more harmony and more peace. But it doesn't mean you have to wait for that. It doesn't mean that you have to be against some archontic system or some matrix that until you ascend out of, you're not going to experience that. Because that stuff in itself is an ego trip. And all those forces that we say are against us, these archetypal forces, are ones that we choose to animate by what we do with our gift of choice and free will. So I can decide today not to empower those systems, not to empower those energies that don't serve. I can see where I've given myself over to frequencies that are not serving me and release myself from those consciously, so that I don't have to wait till death to go through some battle with the archons to get over that, because I can do it here and now. You know, a lot of these texts that people are reading now and understanding through their wounding and through their belief systems, they're forgetting that a lot of it is an archetypal, symbolic or metaphorical framework which can be applied through the individual perspective now, not some battle in the ether, but me renegotiating how I choose and how I work with the power of choice that I've been given. Because the simplest way to describe this is that we are breathed into by the divine. The Holy Spirit animates us through our breath, and then we are filled with the Holy Spirit, we are filled with life force, and in that filling we then have the choice to exhale, to express and choose how to use that. So we are given love, we are given wholeness, we are given breath, we are given animation, and then what do? We choose then how to serve with that, how to offer it from us. The exhale, the thought, the word, the action, what's the quality with which I am going to use that gift that I've been given. And through conditioning, through trauma, through experiences that we have, will affect how we do that. And then we end up in calamity on the planet and start blaming the external image rather than understanding how we participate through the choices that we make to pick certain frequencies, certain beliefs, certain attitudes. My truth, your truth, win or lose, this separation game. But as I said, all those things are needing to be reconciled now, because every polarity is not in opposition, it's actually in relationship. Anything at the either end of a pole is dancing together, and at some point that dance starts to fuse back into singularity, where all polarities are reconciled, and there is a singularity, a moment of singularity, where the picture, the entire image, the entire cosmos can be seen through the lens of the one. And that is the journey of the heart, that is the journey into the fifth dimension. It's not about going somewhere else, it's about seeing differently, it's about perspective, perception. And we are living in an attention economy. The only thing that has real value in this world is attention, because everything is assigned value based on our beliefs about the value it holds. But the truth about creation is that everything is temporary, including destruction, including disease, including chaos. All those things pass away, but love remains always, because love at its most impersonal faculty is just the energy that the cosmos uses to keep everything moving from A to B. So the law of the heart then is rhythm, it's release, it's return, it's transcendence. It's about learning how to let go. It's about learning how to forgive. And again, these sentiments sometimes sound very passive. They sound very weak to a lot of people, because it makes it sound as though we are just overlooking and forgetting some of the atrocities that occur on this planet. But it's not about that. It's about understanding how the law works, and about understanding how the rhythm of creation works. So that's why I talk about it so much in the videos. That's why I keep coming back to it in every video. Maybe I should have called the channel The Law, The Law, The Law or something, because I can't stop talking about it, because I know the power of understanding it. The power of understanding that this system that we live in is built on laws to maintain balance and harmony. And the only thing that creates dissonance is our misunderstanding of that. We get the opportunity through coherence to move into a higher octave of perspective. And again, higher doesn't mean better. It just means that there is only one song being sung here, and we get to choose the octave through which we perceive and hear that sound. So if there's dissonance, then we have to look at where we are in dissonance, because when we choose to elevate ourselves into a higher vantage point, we can start to understand a bit more about why the world is the way that it is. Not understanding every single cause and effect, but understanding that there is a law, and so I don't need to follow that because I trust that it has its place, and I trust that some of the things that are going on the planet today have to take place. And rather than me fighting constantly in battle with that, I can learn to get my boat out in the bay and let this pass by whilst making sure that I don't lose myself, that I don't lose my centre, that I don't become deceitful, conceited, hateful, vengeful in the process. As I say in every video, well, not every video, but as I've touched on many times, it's not that we don't deal with the dissonance. We find a way to bring harmony, but we have to be aware of how we are still playing our part in that game by the beliefs, attitudes, behaviours and perceptions that we choose. Because if I deal with greed and just become greedy as a result, then I've not resolved it. A lot of people will say, well, they're doing it, so why shouldn't I? I understand that. You know, I was speaking to my neighbour the other day, and she was talking about how she was in a shopping centre and someone came in and just cleared out the shelf while she stood in the queue waiting to pay for something. And the security guard says, well, there's nothing we can do unless it's over £200. We don't really get involved. And so the thought then comes, well, I should just walk out with this bottle of shampoo that I've got because nobody else is doing it. But there is something in her that would stop her from doing that, which is her conscience. And we all have a conscience. We all have that voice that tells us whether something is right or wrong. The difference between one person and the next is whether they choose to listen to that voice. And based on a person's circumstances, whether they're in fear, whether they're in lack, survival mode, will dictate which voice they choose to listen to. And granted, some people will choose the voice of fear because it's all they know. Does that mean it's right for the whole? Does that mean that we should just overwrite the voice of the conscience? No, because the voice of the conscience is the one that's wired innately into the laws of creation and knows God at its core. This is the throne room of God, and the journey that we are on is to become the bridge between heaven and earth so that God can retake up the throne here and speak to us clearly from this place. That's the journey, is to be spiritually embodied, not to escape the body for spirituality, but to bring what we know in spirit into the flesh so that we can live a congruent expression of that. A lot of people want to escape this reality. They think they're in some incarnational trap. I would say, what's so bad about being incarnated? You get to experience the gifts of spirit and matter as one. That's the whole point. Heaven and earth reconciled. And that is, whether you like it or not, the trajectory that the world is on. So the calamity is an expression of the resistance on that journey. People that don't want to let go of their creature comforts because they would rather listen to the voice of ego that will grab and hoard and pull in lots of resources and material things for a sense of safety and survival. But the heart knows that all that stuff's temporary anyway, and it will all fall away. Everything falls away, but love will always remain. So all the prophecies, all the words, all the narratives, all falls away one day. And I'm quoting the Bible loosely there. But at the end of the day, there is only one thing that remains, and that's love. So how do I come into a better relationship with love? Not a better relationship with being soft and fluffy and kumbayari, but a better relationship with the nature of things, which is everything passes away, everything has its season, everything has its cycle, and if I can move into a better relationship with those things, then I will find more coherence, more harmony, more balance, more vitality in my life. So this is the law of the heart. It's about understanding, when do I let go? When is the time to forgive? When is the time to stop grieving? When is the time to stop having envy and hatred in my heart? Because by holding on to those things, I'm poisoning my own vessel. I'm poisoning the collective, because as we all know, we're one. So if I'm poisoned, then I'm also adding poison to the system. And that's not a judgment, it's just a fact. It's just to help you understand how the law works. If you resonate hate, envy, greed, there is just more of that in the collective. But if you start to transform that, if you start to let that go, then there is less of it around. It's as simple as that. It's very, very simple. So someone asked me today, how do we connect more to God? How do we feel more into the divine? And this is how. We clear the throne room. We clear all the judgments, all the resentments, all the hatreds, all the envy, all the greed. You know, if you were looking at the biblical stuff, you'd be hearing about the 7 deadly sins. And a lot of people will turn away from that because they don't like the idea of sin, or they've got a rejection of religion, and that's all understandable. But when you strip it back and look at the quality of those energies, envy, greed, lust, resentment, hatred, these things, they distort, they create dissonance, they pollute the heart. And the heart is the central chamber which gives life to the entire system. So if the heart's polluted, then everything else is polluted. And so you can't expect a coherent system if there's incoherence here. So what's the path? What's the way to come into more coherence with God and with my brothers and sisters out there? It's to release all that stuff. Not because you've given up, or because you have lost, or because you're weak, but because you are coming into alignment with what's always true, with nature that has a rhythm. We see nature working with the laws of rhythm through the seasons and cycles of the seasons, of our body, of day and night, of the cosmos. We are affected by all these things. There are seasons and cycles to everything. So the way to live in harmony is to live in harmony with what is already true, the laws that are already there. And whether I like it or not, everything has a time to be released. There's a time to live, a time to die. There's a time to be born. There's a time to cast seeds out, and time to reap what you sow. Again, loosely quoting the Bible, but the laws are in there. As much as there's a lot of nonsense in the Bible, there's laws. The simple laws are also in there. And if you listen to the teachings of Jesus, that's essentially what his role was, to bridge the gap between love and law, so that we could live according to the laws of creation, but also not be so rigid that those things get in the way of our ability to be compassionate to one another. That's why he came to challenge the Pharisees and the system that was, because these people were hypocrites. And we can be very hypocritical. Any judge is a hypocrite at the end of the day, because it has to breathe. There has to be an in and an out breath. There has to be a holding and a letting go. And we, through attunement to ourselves and to the environment, start to learn when is that moment. Because your body tells you when it's time to let something go. And if you don't let it go, you poison your own system. So as I mentioned in previous videos, this is why we see people with extended grief having issues with lungs, breasts, heart, cancers and things like that around here. Because energy gets more and more stagnant until it becomes something physical. This is the law of creation. All thoughts, all emotions, if not dealt with, start to stagnate. Imagine a stream. Imagine a stream that flows beautifully and is fresh and vibrant, and then sticks start to gather until eventually the stream gets more and more clogged up, and then all of a sudden it becomes some bog, and there's mosquitoes and grossness around it. Also, it becomes unsafe to drink or be around. This metaphor can be used to understand what we're doing with the heart, what we're doing with our entire system when we don't let things go. When we start jamming ourselves full of narratives and resentments and little bits of stuff, eventually we create stagnation in the system and it becomes clogged. And this is true of our body, but it's true of the collective body as well. So what is the cause of all this calamity on the planet? It's our inability to live in accordance to the laws of creation while keeping love in mind. It's very difficult to do, but as I said, the journey that we're moving on here is about the coherence between heart and mind. It's not about escaping the body into some astral, and it's not about just identifying with the physical so much that we become stuck in it either. It's about the balance. You could say that's the whole point of creation, is to experience separation so that we can understand unity more wholly. That's as simple as it is. We choose to come into form so we can consecrate that, so we can build the holy temple. It's not about building some holy temple out there made of bricks that we can ask God to come and live in. This is the temple. This is the living temple that God is waiting to dwell within. Not waiting to, really, in theory, because God's always here. But we block out that voice, we block out that presence because we are still so consumed in the noise. And we go on the internet and have all our beliefs affirmed. We have all our stories fed back to us and we go, yeah, I'm right. But at the end of the day, our opinions don't mean anything. Law is law and love is love. Whether you think that's soppy or not, as I said, coming into alignment with love is not easy. So it's the courageous thing to do. To avoid it and pretend you don't need love that's the escapist route, So I understand why people have a problem with the idea of love, because it sounds like it's not doing anything. But love is the only thing that's doing something at the end of the day. So how do I come into alignment with it? That's all we're going to do. Those of you that think you're trapped in a matrix, what does Neo do? He learns the laws of the matrix and then he works how he wants within it. He doesn't escape it. He comes and goes as he wants. Dreaming, physical, dreaming, physical. How do I integrate those two? How do I bring my dreaming into the form? Because where we have been for the last 3 years especially has been this journey of what's real, what's not real, what's illusory, what's genuine. And we're coming out of that. We need to know who we are. Gnosis isn't about reading texts and getting knowledge. It's about knowing yourself, knowing how these patterns apply to you now. Not when you ascend out of the body into some soul trap. There's no soul trap. The soul belongs to God. The more we can get the ego off its trip and into the heart, which knows the deeper truth, then all this stuff starts to become obvious and life starts to become a lot easier. And as I said, this is something that we are doing anyway. The question for the individual is, do you want to come kicking and screaming, or do you want to start working with the law and finding out how you can find more balance? Not just balance, but vitality, health. The body's not designed to live in disease. Disease is a symptom of stagnation, which is a symptom of not letting go. So forgiveness is the ultimate mercy. Not condoning, but knowing now is the time to let go. So the deepest question, the deepest thing to think about with the heart is, what am I still refusing to release? Beliefs, perceptions, ideologies, resentments, anything that separates me from somebody else. This is what we've got to be thinking about. And the more we clear that, the more we see through God's eyes, speak with God's word, hear through God's ears, and think godly thoughts. He just comes. And then there's no, where are you, God? It's like, oh, always. You're just here. So that's where we're going. And if you need help getting there, reach out. Speak to you soon.